Hi friends, in the last video we covered default exception handling in Java. If you are not writing any try catch, how the flow of execution. Sir, it's very clear. I covered 3 examples, right? Sir, now I will explain the most valuable, very important concept for the entire room, exception hierarchy. Remember that. What is the topic? Exception hierarchy. Sir, in Java, there are several exceptions are there, errors are there. File not found exception, out of memory error, like multiple exceptions, multiple errors are there. For all these exceptions and errors, which class acts as parent class? Anyone, can you please tell? Which class acts as a root for exception hierarchy? Sir, for all Java classes, which class is the root? Object class. But for all exceptions and errors, which class acts as a root, sir? Throwable acts as a root. What is that, sir? Can you please confirm? Throwable class acts as root for Java exception hierarchy. Sir, have you observed? Is it a class or is it interface? Throwable, something like runnable, serializable, clonable. Are you getting? So runnable, serializable, clonable, all these are interfaces. What about throwable? Seems to be, it is the name reflects interface name, but it's not interface, it is a class only. Remember that throwable is a class but not interface. All exceptions and errors in Java are child class of throwable, sir. That's why throwable acts as root class for Java exception hierarchy. Next, sir, do you know throwable class contain 2 child classes are there. Observe a bit very carefully, sir. Two child classes are there. What is the first one, sir? Exception. Throwable class contain 2 child classes. First child class is what? Exception. Now the second child class is error, right? Sir, how many child classes are there for the throwable? 2 child classes. What is the first one, sir? Exception. Second one, error. Now, what is the difference between exception and error? Again, very important question for the entire room. What the difference? What the difference between exception and error? Okay, very simple, sir. Most of the times, exceptions are caused by our program. Because of our program only, exceptions will be raised, sir. So, who is the responsible? Sir, who is the reason for exception? Our program only. Sir, my program reading data from your file. At runtime, if file is not available, file not found exception. So, because you are reading the data from that file, that's why the problem is coming. If you are not going to read, the problem may not come. Are you getting? So, most of the times, exceptions are caused by our program only. Okay. Next, exceptions are recoverable or non-recoverable. Exceptions are recoverable. Then immediately you may ask, sir, what is the meaning of recoverable? Recoverable, sir. Sir, now observe, read data from remote file. Read data from remote file. Locating at London, sir. Assume that. So this is my program. This is my programming requirement, right? By mistake, at runtime, if a London file is not available, then file not found exception is going to come. So you are trying to read the data from the London file. So that's why file not found exception is coming. Our program only reason for file not found exception, right? But what is the meaning of recoverable? Assume if a file not found exception is coming, I am in a position to handle use local file and continue rest of the program normally. Sir, very simple. Try and catch block. Sir, what is that exception? File not found exception. File not found exception. Exception E. Use local file. And continue rest of the program normally. Use a local file and continue rest of the program normally. Are you getting? So, who is the reason for exception? Our program. Next, if exception raised, am I in a position to handle or not? Yes, we can handle. Happily, rest of the code will be continued normally. This type of thing is called recoverable. Exceptions are recoverable or not? Yes. Who is the responsible to recover? Programmer is the responsible, or programmer's catch block is the responsible to recover that exception. Clear, right? So, what is an exception? I mean, what is the difference between exception and error? Sir, most of the times exceptions are caused by our program and exceptions are recoverable. Clear, right? Sir, now what about errors? What about error? Very simple, sir. Most of the times errors are not caused by our program. Errors are not caused by our program. Our program code is not responsible to raise error. Okay, most of the times errors are not caused by our program. Errors are non-recoverable. Observe, errors are non-recoverable. Sir, assume, sir, what is the meaning of non-recoverable? I wrote a program, sir. My program execution started. Suddenly, some virus attacked, JVM crashed, sir. Are you getting? Virus got attacked, my system got attacked with the virus, JVM itself got crashed. So, if the JVM got crashed, being a programmer, what I can do? I can't. Then we have to install again Java or again JVM, and then we have to run our program. Are you able to understand, right? Sir, same way. If my program is executing, if out of memory error is coming, sir, out of memory error, sufficient memory is not there. If out of memory error is coming, being a programmer, what you can do? You can't do anything. System admin, server admin, he is responsible to increase heap memory. Out of memory error is coming. What programmer is going to do? Programmer simply seeing, that's all. Okay? Because being a programmer, we can't do anything if error occurs. That's why errors are non-recoverable. Errors are not caused by our program. Errors are caused due to lack of system resources. Are you getting? Just due to lack of system resources. Observe a bit very carefully, sir. Due to lack of system resources, errors got caused. Okay, so maybe sufficient heap memory is not available. Maybe my system attacked with virus. That's why virtual machine got crashed. These type of things are by default considered as errors which are non-recoverable. Clear for all of you, right? Sir, can you please tell which class acts as root for exception hierarchy? Respond, man. Which class acts as root for exception hierarchy? Throwable class. Throwable class contain how many child classes are there? 2 child classes are there. What is the first child classes are? Exception. Second one, error. What is the difference between exception and error? Exceptions are caused by our program. Exceptions are recoverable. Even exception occurs, no problem. I can write catch block to handle that exception. Rest of the code will be continued normally. What about errors, sir? Errors are caused by, okay, not our program, due to lack of system resources. Maybe memory problem, hardware problem, virus attack. These type of things are by default considered as errors. Errors are non-recoverable. If out of memory error came, if virtual machine error occurs, being a programmer, we can't do anything. We have to see, that's all. Our program will be terminated abnormally, which is nothing but what? Error. Sir, very important question for the interview room. What is the difference between exception and error? You people should have clarity. Clear, right? Sir, now it's very clear what is the difference between exception and error. Sir, throwable class contain 2 child classes. Exception, second child class is what? Error. Clear, right? Now, under exception, again, there are several child classes are there. Sir, runtime exception. Runtime exception. Under exception, there are several child classes are there. Runtime exception. Next, do you know IO exception? IO exception. Next, interrupted exception. Very important, sir. In the multi-threading, you will get interrupted exception. Interrupted exception. Next, do you know IO exception, interrupted exception. Next, remote exception, remote exception, like there are several child classes are there, like servlet exception, SQL exception, like multiple child classes are available, right? So observe, under exception there are several child classes: runtime exception, IO exception, interrupted exception, remote exception, like there are multiple child classes are there. Next, under runtime exception, again several child classes are there, sir. Do you know, sir? Arithmetic exception, sir, we saw multiple times in our last example. Arithmetic exception, division by 0. Next, null pointer exception. Next, class cached exception, CCE, class cached exception. Okay. Next, do you know here index out of bounds exception, index out of bounds exception, index out of bounds exception, index out of bounds exception. Further child classes are, do you know, sir, array index out of bounds exception. Array index out of bounds exception is the child class of index out of bounds exception. String index out of bounds exception, which is the child class of index out of bounds exception. Remember this one, sir. Sir, like so runtime exception. For that, multiple child classes are there: arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, class cached exception, index out of bounds exception, array index out of bounds exception, string index out of bounds exception. Similarly, illegal argument exception, illegal argument exception under the number format exception, number format exception is the child class, right? Like, are you getting? So these are under runtime exception, right? Same way, under IO exception also there are multiple child classes are there, sir. Okay, something like EOF exception, something like EOF exception. What is the meaning of EOF, sir? End of file. End of file while reading we can use, but original name is EOF exception only. EOF exception, file not found exception, file not found exception. Okay, like this. Are you getting EOF exception, file not found exception, like that? Multiple interrupted exception, remote exception, like, sir, all these things are related to exception. Clear, right? Similarly, for error also there are several child classes are available. Okay, virtual here VM error. Can you please spell out what is the meaning of VM error? Virtual machine error. Under the stack overflow error, stack overflow error. Next, out of memory error, out of memory error, out of memory error, stack overflow error, out of memory error. Similarly, here, do you know, linkage error is there, linkage error. Further child class is verify error. For the child class is verify error. Next, sir, do you know assertion error? Next, exception in initializer error. Exception in initializer error, like multiple child classes are available. I hope everyone got the basic idea, sir. Minimum commonly occurred exception compulsory you people should be aware, sir. So which class acts as a root for exception hierarchy? Throwable acts as the root. Next, throwable class contain how many child classes are there? 2 child classes. What is the first one? Exception. Second one, error. Next, under exception, how many child classes? Runtime exception, IO exception, interrupted exception, remote exception. servlet exception, SQL exception like multiple. Under runtime exception, arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, class cast exception, index out of bounds exception, array index out of bounds exception, string index out of bounds exception, illegal argument exception, number format exception. Okay, like next under IO, EOF exception, file not found exception, next interrupted exception, which is the child class of exception. Interrupted exception, which is the child class of exception, like this, right? Similarly, under error also multiple child classes are there, like virtual machine error, stack overflow error, out of memory error, linkage error, verify error, assertion error, exception in initializer error. Is it clear for all of you, right? So please make sure basic idea you people should have clear clarity about exception hierarchy. Clear?